What's up, everybody? It's Mike Whitmire, co-founder, CEO of FloQast, inactive CPA as well. Really excited for this episode of Blood, Sweat, and Balance Sheets. Today, we actually have on one of our main investors and board members, Roy Luo of ICONIQ. Roy, thank you for joining us today, man. Excited to have you. Would love you to start with just like brief introduction of yourself, your background, and then we'll kick it off from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It's a privilege, and I just enjoyed working with you and the whole team, and so just grateful for this opportunity. I'm one of the general partners at ICONIQ. We focus on investing, partnering, and working with the most visionary and luminary founders and leaders in industry. We have a common philosophy focused around uncommon care and driving impact in strategically important markets. And I don't think there's a business or a founding team that more resembles all the core hallmarks and values that we value here than what you and the team have been building at FloQast. So really excited to spend some time here today.
And I'm gonna hype you up a little bit on your behalf. You are routinely and consistently one of our executives' favorite people to work with. Consistently, really happy with you and just impressed with your knowledge and work ethic and everything. And I'll tell you, man, it starts from like day one of meeting you. I remember that investor conference that we were at. It was like end of day. I had been meeting with VCs all day long, and then Roy from ICONIQ sits down and I think knows as much about FloQast as I knew about FloQast, and I was just blown away with your knowledge of like the industry, the space, our buyers, the company itself, and it was all a great way to kick it off. And you've been awesome ever since then, man. It hasn't slowed down. So, been a pleasure working with you, and just wanted to pump you up a little bit more there.
Oh, thank you. That's too kind of you.
And with that, you've obviously worked with FloQast, but you worked with a lot of great companies, a lot of great companies that were founded at different times in the business life cycle. A lot of them are SaaS. And today we want to talk a lot about how SaaS companies are embracing AI and shifting more into that AI world, and some becoming truly AI native. So can you start by just maybe introducing us to some of the companies you've worked with over the years, kind of what they looked like when you joined, and then maybe a little bit of how they've made some changes over time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we've been fortunate to have been doing this for over a decade now, and then for my personal career, similar kind of time frame. And what we're familiar with is that there are some core tenets that we look for in terms of teams that are able to drive impact and really win in the market. And we humbly try to serve as partners to help achieve those visions. And the thing is that the framework and the environment in which you're building will change over time. And there are different paradigm shifts. We kind of had the mobile wave, we had the cloud wave. Obviously today you have the AI wave. And a lot of these businesses, they don't get to pick and choose when they start. So they have these core traits, values that help them persist through whatever the market environment kind of brings to the table for them. And so, yes, there's this whole like SaaS AI native, narrative right now, but ultimately, the core attribute that we look for are teams and leaders that are absolutely customer obsessed, have amazing product intuition, are fundamentally builders, and have grit, and are constantly looking for ways to build and innovate for their customers and achieve the grand vision that they have around driving impact to that market. And so a lot of our businesses in the portfolio have started, over the last decade, and they've gone through different waves. We went through COVID, we went through a big mobile transition, we went through a big cloud transition. There are those that have started life in the last 5 years. There are those that have started 10 plus years ago. But those core attributes have helped them carry through time and time again. We've been very fortunate to partner with some amazing businesses over the years, guys like the Anthropics of the world, the Datadogs of the world, at this point like Snowflake, Databricks, Stripe, Audit, guys across fintech, infrastructure, cybersecurity, you name it. And certainly in software, it's just been an amazing run. Ultimately, again, it comes down to the team, and what we've seen is people are building consistently. And so in the SaaS AI native, call it transition, really what it's been is twofold. First is, are you leveraging the tools and the ecosystems around you to stay ahead of the game? The common attribute is that these teams have amazing engineering cultures, great product intuition, and an ability to build high quality products fast and with great iterations and a close kind of pulse on the voice of the customer. And so now that there is a bunch of tooling and ecosystem development in AI, those are the teams that are moving most aggressively to adopt and leverage these tools so they can stay ahead of the curve and build quickly. And what results from that is they're also able to layer in these tools into the product offerings themselves and be the conduits to bring AI to their customers. In the same way they took advantage of the infrastructure provided from the cloud, for example, built for mobile, for example. Now we're building with AI and for AI. And that's, I think, what you ultimately are trying to do and serve when you're building for any market.
Yeah, the move of infrastructure is probably a really great comparison. Like AWS made things so much easier for companies to get started. I know FloQast probably wouldn't exist today if we had to stand up a server room and do all that good stuff. So AWS is I think a pretty good comp. The other one I think about just in terms of like broad business change is as extreme as that on-premise software to cloud transition, which occurred in the late '90s, early 2000s was kind of when that came on the scene. Obviously, we all know Salesforce and look at them as one of or as the pioneer in this space. And I look at companies around that time who were really successful on-prem solutions. Like to go back to the Salesforce example, I like talking about Siebel Systems, which is a company that at the time was the Salesforce of today in the CRM space, and they kind of failed to be adaptable and make that change. Whereas then Salesforce came along, they came with a cloud native approach to it. They did really well, but then Salesforce has been super agile over the last 25 years and continues to adapt to the environment, I would say, really well. So I think it's the additional caveat, I guess, is like founders, you got to be adaptable to this time frame. Can't be too dogmatic about what you've done in the past, and willing to kind of rip up playbooks and try some new things. Is that something you're seeing across the portfolio?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you're harping on the same kind of core value attribution, which is like those that are willing to take risks, be aggressive. Obviously, you have to be right, but moving with conviction, trusting your intuition and instincts, and taking aggressive measures has always been what I think has led to businesses not staying stagnant and being able to develop and stay ahead and move with the times. And so there have been ways and ways of different challenges that face every business. And those teams that are willing to take those chances, take the calculated risks, and persist through are the ones who have consistently innovated, reinvented themselves, and won at the end of the day. And if you look at some of the largest businesses today and just the amazing kind of traction that they've had, they've been multi-product companies that have gone through different waves over years, if not decades. And that is consistently what we see as the common thread amongst those that have built everlasting, the most impactful businesses out there.
And you and I have talked about this behind the scenes, but I thought it'd be interesting for the audience. You see a lot of SaaS companies where maybe the founder had ejected themselves, was not the CEO anymore, and you see them coming back, taking over the reins and running the ship again. I would say the most extreme example, largest market cap company is Workday, with Aneel coming back and taking over the organization. Do you think some of that is because the founder has a higher risk appetite and is more willing to make those bold changes and move forward? Is that sort of what's driving that concept in the market?
I think it's a little bit of that, but I also think it's also just passion, humility, closeness to the customer, the market, and their teams. I think founders, because they started from the beginning, they just have a unparalleled sense of the DNA of the org, the DNA of the customer. And so their intuition, which is, in my opinion, not something you can teach, is something that you cannot compare. And so, we tend to really work well and see continued success amongst those who have great product and engineering intuition. And that comes from the fact that they understand their customer intimately. And so this idea of founders coming back is mostly because these are the founders who understand the customer the best, and they have a passion and they have a vision and a clarity of thought. And so I think we're seeing that across the board where there are more executives coming back either as founders or with some sort of product and engineering background. And that's what's in vogue lately across the board. And I think that is going to be what gets businesses through a massive time of change.
Hmm. And actually, on that note, Iconic uniquely maintains relationships with founders, and I think the founding story of Iconic in and of itself is interesting. Would you mind sharing a little bit about the firm itself and what makes you guys unique?
Yeah, I mean, our whole goal was to really build a really unique community with founders and leaders across industry. And so we have been fortunate to work with leaders, not just in tech, but in all sorts of end markets, food and beverage, energy, real estate, fashion, CPG, and it's global at this point. And these are the founders, leaders, who have been building businesses in all sorts of end markets, and they are consistently at the frontier and pushing the envelope of how can I serve my customer? How can I serve my market? How do I deliver more impact? And they're consistently always talking and looking around the world for what could give them a leg up and stay ahead of the curve, basically. And so we've curated this community, and what I think is unique about it is that it expands far beyond tech in Silicon Valley. So it allows us to have a really unique perspective and go beyond, Silicon Valley and California, and be able to understand the puts and takes, the challenges, the tailwinds in all sorts of end markets and geographies. And then being able to distill those insights and help port them over to the businesses and the founders that we work with, has been one of the greatest privileges of my career. But we started with this idea of building a community and delivering uncommon care and staying as humble partners to help these founders drive towards impact. And we've done that through our multifamily office platform and our venture partners and portfolio to be able to deliver this in a full service way.
Yeah, I'll say I want to give you the opportunity to pitch that just because it's a unique, highly valuable community. I know for myself personally, I've gone to a couple of the CEO events, and the first one I attended, I find myself across the table at the dinner from a CEO of a company that's responsible for shipping stuff around the world, and I'm like, it couldn't get maybe much different from FloQast, but it was so interesting hearing the perspective of a CEO from an organization like that versus the tech CEO sitting to the left of me. So it's really a helpful community to get those different perspectives, and it's helped me personally. So it's been awesome partnering with you, man, and I'm really excited with what Iconic has done so far.
That's very kind.
So then I want to take it back to our audience. We obviously have a lot of accountants watching this, and you've had access to a lot of different companies. When you look at AI and how it's going to apply to accounting, like what goes through your mind from the investor perspective? Where do you see that going?
I'm super pumped, and in some ways, I'm a finance professional myself, but I can never claim that I know remotely as much accounting as those that are actually in the field. But I'd say that there's just a lot of stuff that, from a productivity perspective, AI has enabled. It's personally changed my life quite a bit, and I think it enriches the type of work, the type of thinking that you can do. In my perspective, I think AI is a huge productivity enabler. And like any wave of technology, I know, Mike, you and I've talked about this quite a bit, but any wave of technology causes some level of disruption and a paradigm shift, but the productivity gains are what pushes humanity forward in every profession. And I think in particular for finance and in particular for accountants, I think there are massive gains. In accounting in particular, there's a lot of, I think, careful judgment calls that need to be made. And so you're kind of merging what I think is a very human element of decision making and judgment calls married with strict frameworks and being able to then encapsulate that and automate a lot of that as well. So you can actually provide way more time and resources back to those very professionals. And at a time right now where I believe we are seeing shortages of professionals in this field, more so than ever before, I think this is exactly the productivity boost that we are providing to the industry that enables them to be able to fill a lot of the gaps in terms of supply and demand of productivity in this function.
Hmm. And one of the things that's interesting to me about the industry is I feel like the way the work is going to shift is becoming sort of clearer and clearer by the day. particularly with some of the new compliance requirements coming out. And one of the things I appreciate about working with you is like we talk about the office of the CFO, for example, and there is that nuance between finance and accounting. And there are different requirements that each group have. There are different ways of working. And obviously, accounting is way more beholden to compliance requirements, audits, Sarbanes-Oxley, all that fun stuff. And it seems like Gen AI, because it's great, but it does present some risk. It's not always accurate. There are pretty strict compliance requirements coming down on that. So I guess that's all to say from my perspective. It's like we have the talent gap issue. We're going to have it in an even more extreme way, but to plug that is going to require a really strong depth of understanding of how AI works. And that's kind of a tough double-edged sword for us to solve in accounting. Like we need more people just in general, but we also need more people who really know AI extremely well in a field where, sometimes people can be slow to move and retrain and learn on new things. So like we're thinking deeply about how we solve that problem here at FloQast. Is just one that's rapidly changing. You see any parallels in other industries that have like compliance requirements going to come along as part of this, or is that a sort of accounting specific thing?
No, I don't think it's accounting specific at all, actually. And I think it's more about the ecosystem evolving and catching up. We
Mhm.
are seeing a time where capabilities are developing at an accelerated pace, like in some ways, like faster than we've ever seen before. And there's a lot of catch up that needs to happen. There's like some zeitgeist, these days around a dialogue on, hey, like these tools are proliferating without a lot of scrutiny around the costs on it. And so people are getting surprised by the bills and all that kind of stuff. That has nothing to do with whether or not AI is being helpful or productive or not. It's just that people are using it and learning, and we don't know exactly how to best use it or how to most safely or most effectively use it. And that's okay, right? Like we are still in the steep part of the learning curve. And like any mature technology, you have those that are risk taking, those that are less risk taking, and there will be some sort of steady state level of adoption that will gradually kind of permeate kind of all industries globally at this point, right? Compliance is a major component of that. And I think it isn't necessarily just about compliance. It gets to a very critical piece, which is trust. And so I think there are certain market segments, I think there are certain verticals, and I think there are certain functions where like the stakes are higher or lower. And so you'll see that the most aggressive adoption early on are those where the negative costs are not, all doom and gloom. And so, for example, there's been a lot more development around cybersecurity controls. I think people have been very careful about how to think about applying AI to cybersecurity because it can be used for offensive and defensive measures. And so it's something that people are being very thoughtful about. And so I think being thoughtful around governance and the mission around safe and sustainable AI development and usage, honestly, like that's been one of the guiding principles for, say, Anthropic when they've been building. And so I think that is a really thoughtful way of making sure that a game-changing technology and paradigm is able to most, productively and efficiently and effectively kind of impact the world all around us. And so the thought pattern that you're expressing and how we're guiding our own thinking roadmap, product intuition, it's exactly what I think makes FloQast so special. But understanding kind of where the puck is going and being able to develop for those frameworks, stay ahead of the curve, that's ultimately what businesses and leaders in these businesses are all about. And so, with things like Claude Code out there, sure, I can build a lot of stuff, but I am not necessarily a subject matter expert in a lot of stuff. And so being able to understand what to build versus how to build it is more important than ever before. And so
Mhm.
understanding these compliance frameworks, and this isn't just in accounting, this is all over the place. Like talk about legal, customer engagement, fintech, privacy and identity, obviously cybersecurity, it's all over the place. And I think it's something that we'll see as a guiding principle for a lot on how businesses, particularly as you grow larger and larger, the stakes are higher, think about procuring and using AI.
Yeah, it actually it elevates the importance of innovation and allows execution on that innovation to go way faster and be much easier. It's a fascinating time. Like when I when I work with models and I'm learning, for example, chatting through these compliance frameworks and helping me understand it, and we're having a conversation back and forth, it definitely is then it's on me to be asking the right questions, but then also understand, like, based on my real world experience in audit, how is this going to ultimately get applied and how is it going to shake out? Like a document that a model has been trained on is going to have one take on it, but then there's the reality of like the experience and how do you take that into the real world and make it impactful. So it's been fun. I love using it from like a brainstorming perspective and on that route, and it's been super helpful for me. And we're seeing a lot of different use cases within accounting. But yeah, the theme is like if it's touching financial statements, it's got to be at the very least you're in a trust but verify mindset. And when you extend into like publicly traded companies, SOX, then it starts to fall under key systems, all that good stuff. And so there are audit requirements behind it. But that's the nuance of accounting, like is understanding every touch point with the financials or where it pops up in the 10Qs or the 10Ks. It's got to be audited.
Totally. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it's a funny little anecdote, but I often think about this story that Tom Cruise once shared, where he I think it was the Burj, but he saw this building and he's like, I gotta climb that building or do this stunt. And he says, I gotta do this stunt. He goes to his safety guy and he says, I'm gonna do this stunt. And he consults with the safety guy, and the safety guy's like, that's crazy. There's no way you can do it. Like you can't. And so he's like, okay, so I got a new safety guy. And I think it gets to this spirit, which is like these frameworks, compliance. Like I think you want a trusted partner, and this is why I love what you and the team at FloQast are doing. You want a trusted partner that knows what the frameworks are commercial partners, and thinking through how to accomplish your goals most effectively with those frameworks. It's so easy to just say no. It's so easy to just say no and be conservative and never accomplish anything. What you want to be able to do is say, hey, I want to be aggressive on AI. And how do I do it in the most effective way without breaking anything while staying safe, right? And
Mhm.
so I think that spirit is embodied in all elements of life, but I think that's the kind of partner that you should be looking for.
Yeah, and it's there's been a lot of talk early on with AI. You hear it from the models companies and just the news in general is about how much job displacement there's going to be as a result of this. I'll tell you, I'm not necessarily seeing that play out internally, and as a CEO, I view it much more as a productivity tool. Like I'd rather us grow faster and do more versus do the same amount leveraging AI. And it seems like that narrative is actually shifting a little bit as well. You hear the frontier model providers themselves talk about it being a productivity gain and getting more done and less about like reduction. When you look at your portfolio companies, is that consistent? Is that the theme that you're seeing and it's more a shift in the style of work, or are you seeing like people just moving on?
It's absolutely about productivity gains. I think that, and there's been, especially these days, there's been a lot of dialogue around how we aren't seeing necessarily like the evidence of like AI job displacement, all that kind of stuff. But then you kind of try to reconcile that with like things you're hearing in the field about these different layoffs and all that kind of stuff that's out there. I think what we're not seeing like job declines. Like what we are seeing is talent shifts and talent upgrades of sorts. Really, what you want to see, and we've seen businesses that have taken a more aggressive position on this, but I thought it was a really interesting kind of anecdote. But you provide, say, unlimited access to all this AI tooling, and your simple ask to the company is like, hey, we'll give you unlimited access for a while, right? And try it, experiment with it. Like that's the ask to you as a member of the team to just see what you can do with it. And at the end of some period, you take a look, and there's some who like really dove in and try to do all kinds of things. Some of it was useful, some of it's not. And you have those who just never bothered even opening or logging in or trying. And the analogy was like, hey, if back in the day everyone was writing and then I gave you a typewriter and I asked you to like learn to type, or today you join a company and I give you Microsoft Outlook, I gave you Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and Excel, and you never once used any of these tools that I'm giving you to use, like what are you doing? Like why are you here? Like we are trying to give you tools to do the job. And so it's a very basic expectation to say, hey, at least try, right? Obviously, it's incumbent upon us to give you the leverage, the tools, the training, but we're not at that stage yet. We just want to have you just experiment and try with it. And so I think
Yeah.
that's a lot of like what we're seeing, which is it's a shift, right? And I think like every paradigm shift, there's like people who were like rejected like the mobile phone, people who rejected the idea of like cloud computing and things like that. And change is hard, and there's always going to be those that lean into it and those that are more resistant to it. And these are all gradual shifts, and there's always going to be time that needs to happen in between these paradigms to get from point A to point B. And so labor is always going to be in the at the focal point of a lot of that. And so yeah, we're not seeing a lot of it, but I think in the portfolio, what we are seeing is just really aggressive movements from leaders to set a new culture, set a new paradigm, really lean into AI, train folks, and there's always going to be transition from point A to point B, not just in our portfolio, but just across the entire industry.
Yeah. I view it kind of within accounting, at least accounting specifically. I do view this technology shift kind of on par with like Excel coming out. And if you think about an accounting department when Excel came out, if you had a team of 8 people in the accounting department and only one chose to use Excel and the other 9 were like, no, I'm cool doing it by hand, that one person is going to look like a superhero and they're doing so much more work than everyone else. And then you fast forward, maybe like 15 years, and the idea of entering the workforce not knowing Excel is just an insane thing. And I bet you, and I've seen this with Claude and with the other frontier model providers, I haven't talked to a single person who has taken the time to learn how to use them and regretted the time they spent on it. Not a single person. Everyone's happy they invested their time. It's not even that much time. They learned how to use it and they're way more productive as a result of it. And then also in many ways, you're future-proofing your career. Like that's what you should be doing. You're going to be the wizards internally for now, right? But then in 5 years, it's just going to be how you work. And if you don't know that, if you don't know how to work with a model in an intelligent way, like you're going to be left behind. And so I do think it's incumbent on everyone to be training or upskilling in this and like taking that responsibility on their own, because no one's going to necessarily do it for you, and companies do expect you to be using this technology.
I think that's such a great analogy, honestly. I had at one point spent a little time in investment banking and people talking like, are there going to be jobs for analysts anymore? And I forget if it was Morgan Stanley or Goldman or someone. It was just like back in the day, analysts would like by hand spread comps and valuation multiples on companies. And I was not in that era, but I was in the era where I had like Excel and Cap IQ and I hit a couple of buttons and it just does it all. And I can't even imagine a world where I had to do it like number by number, name by name, by hand. That's crazy to me. And
It,
I'm
it,
sure in, another decade, people will look at what I used to do and be like, that's crazy.
yeah. People used to add up subledgers by hand. There were T-sheets, there's paper. It's nuts to think about it that way. And then even if you want to go to the analyst example, you move away from like the level of thinking can go up. You're not necessarily analyzing a spreadsheet and maybe gross margins or anything. You might be able to just level up and be like, okay, strategically, like where's the world going and what's the value of this company ultimately going to be? And it's beyond the spreadsheet. It's like a little higher order thinking. And you're able to do that because you have the time, because of the technology. And then also you have a collaborator to have those discussions with a Claude or whatever, whatever your preferred model is. I just say Claude because we use it a lot internally. And that actually leads to one of my next questions is, I talk about this a lot in the founding of FloQast, and one of our big things is with our software, and I am not trying to disparage IT by any stretch of the imagination, but the reality is IT is busy, and accounting is one of the last functions to get resources from IT to help them out with systems. So we talk about how when we build FloQast, we want it to require as little of IT's time as humanly possible, because the reality is like, if accounting can own their own software and own as much of their implementation as possible, that's the most certain way it's going to get done. Whereas if you have to hand it off to an IT department, you're going to have a lower probability of that getting done. And again, I mean, no offense to IT through all that. So now if you take that concept that accounting is the last to get resources from a technical perspective, you extend that out into AI usage now. At FloQast, we all of a sudden are spending a lot of money on AI, and now we have to take a step back and be like, okay, number one, what are the productivity gains we're getting out of it? Like, cool, we're spending a lot of money, but what's the actual impact of the spend that we're getting? And then once we do arrive at those various forms of impact, that there's going to maybe only be so much budget. And so you're going to start looking at different departments and being like, maybe you don't need AI as much as engineering, for example. Like you can see such a productivity gain on engineering to where a CFO might have to make a tough call and be like, we're spending 20 million bucks a year on AI right now, and we just need to focus on building products better. And so engineering gets all of it. And or maybe we'll give sales a little bit of it as well. But I bet you accounting is low on that list of departments that are going to get tokens allocated to them. So like, I believe this notion of like token rationing is about to come out, and there's going to be not necessarily unlimited usage given to the accounting department, simply because that's like the way of the world within businesses and IT departments. Is that like, how do you think about token rationing? Or is that a deal where like the technology will sort itself out, it'll get more reasonably priced, and everyone's going to have access to it, and it won't be a problem?
Yeah, my personal belief is that at equilibrium, like it's going to be it's like all supply demand dynamics, and it will reach a rate that is sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's much of an argument to be said about how AI can deliver huge gains and productivity improvement, but the cost side of the equation, we're still in pretty early phases right now. And nowadays people are talking about just getting surprised by the bill. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. There's like chip shortages, compute shortages, power shortages. Like, there's a lot that in the supply chain of AI has not reached equilibrium. And then, that's the cost side of the equation for even the frontier models. And then on the revenue side of the equation, like there's also just inefficient usage. Like I don't necessarily need the fanciest, most expensive model and highest level of thinking to write a very simple email, for example, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're just in really early innings. Like we're not even close. I think the reason why this whole notion of token maxing and unlimited budgets, it's there to facilitate change and take this course of what's the new normal look like and get you from paradigm A to paradigm B quickly. And then comes rationalization, frameworks. We talked a little bit about the compliance side of things, but it's everything. It's not just compliance, it's security, it's costs. There's so much that goes into it that needs to still catch up. So it's an exciting time because we're still in such early phases of this. But I don't see a world where we get to a point where token rationalization prevents people from getting access to this kind of stuff. To your analogy on Excel, for example, like everybody has access to Excel. The pricing rationalization and delivery mechanisms, we went from, CD-ROMs to cloud access and Office 365, things like that. I think things will develop over time, but I do believe in ubiquitous access. I do believe in ubiquitous value delivered to all users in all departments. The productivity gains are all over the place. One can argue, I don't know, maybe that people look at like intuitive functions like accounting or legal and things like that, and they're like, this is actually where, so much like benefit can actually happen through AI, and like it might actually bring more like sense of urgency and speed. Hopefully, we'll see into being able to allocate budget in AI to those types of functions. To your point, I see a lot of it in engineering today. But it's going to be different also for different markets. I also have to acknowledge that a lot of what the initial phases of AI were, the adopters are, a lot of them are in the most forward-thinking roles at major tech companies. But we are seeing, folks in all sorts of industries, manufacturing, bakeries and small businesses and things like that. Like it's getting there and it's all over the place. And I'm excited for the future that that we see kind of before us here. And yes, there's a lot of ecosystem catching up to do.
Yeah, and engineers are always going to be the most curious, the first ones adopting technology, and then the power users of it out the gate. And there's going to be some normalization across departments as that goes. And yeah, man, everyone believes their work is of the Opus 4.8 quality right now, and so you're running the most expensive model when perhaps there are some more reasonably priced ones that can be used for certain tasks. And I bet you that's a big landing point for all of it and how we optimize around cost there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. What have I not asked you about AI that you think's interesting and important, and you think the accounting world might be interested in?
Well, I think right now people are asking about like what can I be doing not just with AI, but then in addition, so now that I'm getting more time back
Hmm.
and like what should I be doing with that time? And so in some ways, I'm actually curious, bring the conversation to accountants, how you start thinking as a strategic partner in the role of finance. And I wonder about the gray zone around these different roles in a finance organization. You have bookkeepers, you have controllers, you have compliance folks, you have strategic finance, business line finance, sales compensation frameworks. And, as people get more and more time back, and a lot of the lower level functions in any given role start to be able to fall under agents and things like that, and you're taking your thinking to a higher level, how do you start getting even more creative and become a strategic partner to the mission of a business, right? I think some of the
Hmm.
coolest things that I've seen are businesses that are actually enabling all people on their team and their organization to help contribute to product builds. So folks are building agents that allow like someone in accounting or someone in customer support to actually build product features in the product that they are selling. You
Hmm.
take a phone call, you hear about some complaints, and you don't have to do this typical iteration cycles with product and engineering. You can do it yourself, right? And for folks like at FloQast, for example, I'm particularly excited because we are building for finance. So our own finance consumers can look at that and be like, hey, what can I be using and doing even better? And how does that feed into the product? And I do see a world where lines start to blur and people can be more strategic thinkers for their respective business lines, whether you're
Yeah, yeah.
building, tech for construction or tech for accountants or IT professionals or cybersecurity, anything like that.
Yeah, I agree. I bet you. So there are many accountants who would say, first and foremost, I'd like to go home at a reasonable hour. So I'd like to
Yeah.
automate some of that work, right? Just simple as like some work life balance would be nice. But then second, there are different areas that accountants do enjoy and they'd like to straddle over into rather than being at Excel wailing away all day. I think finance is certainly one of them. A lot of accountants love the idea of like straddling into finance, being more forward thinking, doing analysis, that kind of work. There are accountants who love operational efficiency. So if you can pare your time down and then not be doing rote work and pick your head up a little bit and think about operational efficiency, that's a little more cross-functional and you can have a bigger impact on the organization and does require like meeting with people and an understanding of what's going on and everything. So I think that's another interesting opportunity. There's always like I think gap and compliance is going to continue to be a need and a requirement and things that require interpretation. And so yeah, you there are a few different functions that are like people's core job description, but they have so much other work they have to do that they actually don't do that core job description. I'll even go to like people management. A lot of controllers, big part of their job is to manage the team and manage the people and be a really great leader and everything. But the reality is they get bogged down in reviewing reconciliations and spend their whole week head down in Excel and don't have the ability to give their team the proper time they need to be well managed and felt like they're led by somebody great and developing their career and everything. So I think everyone's a little different, but it frees up time to do whatever you like most and your job that you're not able to get to because you're in Excel all day right now, which is exciting. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an exciting future. So like I think there's a lot of fear around it, but based on where accounting is heading and where some of the opportunities are, I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be great for the industry.
Totally.
Yeah.
And to bring the conversation to FloQast, like I think having a trusted partner to help navigate through these times is exactly what you want, right? I do think AI is very self-empowering. And so like, at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about this whole like SaaS AI native thing. I don't really think of it that way. I think you have trusted partners. Any successful business that we've been fortunate to partner with, they treat all their customer conversations not like, hey, I have something I'm trying to sell you. I am your partner as you think about X. And that could be your finance agenda, that could be your compliance agenda, that could be your enterprise digital transformation, cybersecurity, whatever it might be. But when you have a relationship like that, then I think you become problem solvers to help your customers think through what are the things that they need to be thinking about and building towards. AI falls dead center in a lot of these types of conversations these days. And so
Yeah.
again, it comes to product intuition and customer intuition. You guys have that in spades. And I couldn't think of a better position and a better partner to have as I'm trying to think through this and in finance in particular.
Well, I think I'm going to end it on an awesome compliment there. Doesn't get much better than that, man. I appreciate it. So I don't want to continue going in case it takes a wrong direction.
Ha! I always have time for you, man, and I will never run out of nice things to say.
No, I appreciate that, and I really appreciate you carving out the time to join the podcast and talk to the audience. I hope they found it interesting from such a unique perspective and someone who's so in the know on AI from all different angles. Whether ICONIQ is a big investor in Anthropic directly, so you have really great understanding there, and then so many SaaS companies you've worked with across various industries. And I hope people notice that you really appreciate the nuance of the different buying centers and what applies to them in a different way, and just like great takes on AI here. So thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the time. It was a pleasure.
All right. Have a good one, Roy.